primary scripture for the. All right, let's go ahead and go over your lesson. All right, so we've been talking about the judges. So yesterday we talked about the second and third judge that the Lord selected to lead the people. So remember, Othniel was the first judge. He judged for 40 years and then he died. And after he died, the Israelites went back to worshiping false gods. So the Lord raised up their another enemy, King Eglon, over them. And he was charging them high taxes. And he actually ruled over them for 18 years. So that was longer than the other king of Mesopotamia, the other king. So he ruled over them for 18 years. And after they got tired of it, they cried out to the Lord and they asked the Lord to deliver them from their, to deliver them from the bondage that they were in from this king. So here we see the Lord raise up a new judge, Ehud. The Lord raised him up, and the Lord gave him a plan. So he made that 18-inch dagger. Remember, he got everyone's taxes and he pretended that he was going to the king to deliver the taxes. So when he gets to the palace, he tells the king, he says, "Oh, I have a secret to tell you." And so the king is like, "Everybody get out," so he could hear the secret. And little did he know that Ehud was planning to, execute him. And he did. He stabbed the king and the king died. And he locked the door, so all his guards, they didn't know what was going on. But after a long time, when they went in to check and they realized the doors were locked, they knew that something was wrong. So they finally were able to get in, and they saw that the king was dead, but Ehud had done left already and had done escaped. But whenever he got back to the Israelite, when he got back to the people, he told them to prepare for battle because he knew that they would come to fight. And they sure enough did have a battle. They had a battle, and 10,000 of the Moabites died that day. And so Israel had victory over them, and they were no longer under their bondage. And so Ehud judged Israel for 8 years. He was over them, leading the people and being their judge. He dies, and we already know when he died, what happened. The people went back to worshiping the false gods, and so they came under bondage again. This time they were placed under bondage by a group of people called the Philistines. And so the Philistines were placed over the people, and they treated the people really bad. They constantly were, messing with the Israelites. They always had issues between them. And so they were, the Lord raised, but that's because they had turned away from God. So then when they cry out to the Lord for help, of course, God comes and he delivers them, and he raises up a third judge, Shamgar. He raises him up, and we don't know much about him, but Shamgar, we do know that whenever they had a battle with the Philistines, he killed 600 of them himself with an ox goad. So this wasn't like some type of sword or anything like that. This was just like a wooden stick with like metal on the end, and he was able to slay 600 Philistines with that alone. And so when the Philistines saw what Shamgar did, how he had slayed 600 alone by himself, they backed off, and he judged Israel for some time. And so, of course, whenever, there's a judge, and that's what we talked about. Every time there's a judge, they do the right thing, right? They serve God, they worship God. I mean, they weren't perfect, but I'm saying they try to stay and they try to obey God's commands. But it's every time they don't have a judge, that's when we see them turn into idolatry. They start to worship idols. They start to worship false gods. So, of course, just like all the other judges, Shamgar dies, right? And he isn't judging Israel anymore, and there's no judge over them anymore. And so after the judge is gone, we see they leave God and they go back to worshiping the false gods. You would think they would learn their lesson by now, right? To stay close to the Lord and stop turning away from the Lord. But they do. They're human. They do. And so they turn back to worshiping the idols of all the people in the land. Now, that's why it goes back to, what were they supposed to do with the people in the land? Take them out of the land. And we see how since they allowed them to stay in their land, they are worshiping the gods of those people. They are leaving the true and living God who they cry out to deliver them, which is crazy, right? They'll cry out to God to help them and to deliver them, but then they'll go worship a fake God. That doesn't make sense, right? Really doesn't, but that's what they would do. So they turned away from God because there's no judge over them. No one is leading them towards the Lord. And so they turn away from God and they start to worship idols again. So guess what the Lord does? He allows their enemies to rule over them. So the Lord this time raises up some of the Canaanites. And some of the Canaanites came, Jabin, for he was the king of Canaan. He was the king at that time. And they attacked Israel. And guess what? The Lord did not come to rescue his people from the Canaanites and the king. He did not come to rescue them. So King Jabin, he was able to take some of their land from them. The land that belonged to them, that God had promised to give to the Israelites, this Canaanite king was able to come up against the Israelites, fought them, and took their land. So, and not only did he take their land, but then he started to treat them really bad. Really bad. So now the people are back in bondage again. Another nation is ruling over them again. So now another nation is ruling over them again. And so the Israelites, they didn't like it. They didn't like being being under the rule of another nation, being treated the way that they were being treated. Not just that, then they lost some of their land as well. So after they were unsuccessful in defeating the Canaanites and King Jabin, they were like, we need to turn to the Lord, right? Now that's the thing. They don't go to their false gods for help. Don't you think that's interesting? They don't go to the false god for help. That God that they keep turning from the true and living God to go worship Baal, the false god, they're not turning to that God. They're going to the Lord. So they're like, God, we need you to help us. So the thing is, why are they worshiping the false gods when they know who the real true and living God is? It doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't. They're there. They know who God is because they keep crying out to him. But then yet they go back to worshiping these gods that they know are not true. They know that these gods are fake. They're false gods. They cannot do anything. So yeah, so they turn to the Lord, the real God, and they cry out to the Lord for deliverance. And they say, God, please help us. We need freedom. We don't want to be in this bondage. Yet again, they cry out to the Lord, asking the Lord to deliver them. So there was a lady named Deborah, and she was a prophetess. Okay. So have you heard of prophets before? Prophets are people who speak on behalf of God. God will speak to the prophet, and the prophet usually gives the people the message that the Lord has given him. And so Deborah, she's a prophetess because she's a woman. That's why it's called prophetess, but it's the same thing. She speaks on behalf of God. God gives her a message and she tells the people. So Deborah was a very brave and wise woman who worshiped God. I mean, like I said, she was a prophetess. So during this time of them being underneath King Jabin and the Canaanite rule, the people would usually go to Deborah and ask her for counsel and, advice. And she would always remind the people of God's commands and what God expects from them. So she tried to tell them what they should and shouldn't do. She tried to let them know what the Lord expected from them. But, unfortunately, they wouldn't always listen to her. But so Deborah was known as a prophetess in the land. And so everyone knew she always gave good counsel, good advice, and everyone would go to her to speak to her. So during the time where the Canaanites, King Jabin is ruling over the people, they needed help. Because they were like, we need to get out of this bondage. We're tired of being here. We're tired of them ruling over us and treating us the way that they are treating us. We need deliverance from this. So there was a Canaanite ruler who was in Jabin's army, and his name was Sisera. Okay, Sisera, same name. Anyway, so he was a general who was in charge of the army. Now he thought everything was bad, but he was really, really harsh. He treated the people the Israelites really bad. Okay. So he had not only was he a leader of the army, the Canaanite army, which was a strong army, but he had 900 iron chariots. Okay. So he was not somebody that you could easily defeat. You could easily, just say, hey, let's go ahead and attack. We're going to defeat them. No, it was not like that. So not only were they under the rule of the Canaanites, but the Canaanite was a very strong army with a very strong general. So that's why the Israelites knew this was not going to be easy for them to get delivered from this army, from the Canaanites. They knew it would not be a simple task for them to become free. But again, whose fault is this? Why are they even in this place? Because of who? Them, right? We can't blame God, right? God is allowing it to happen because what are they doing to God? Disobeying him. They are turning away from God. So God is allowing this to happen because of their disobedience. It's not like God is happy with that, but this is their consequence for turning away from the Lord. They are not serving God the way that they should. They are not honoring God and obeying his commands. And so this is the stuff that's happening. They're in this, under this bondage of this cruel king, this cruel army, this strong and mighty army with a general that treats them just as bad. So his soldiers would, and so this is what they would do. Not only were they ruling over the Israelites, they took their land, but his soldiers would ride their chariots and just shoot arrows at the Israelites and just shoot them down. That's the stuff they would do. So like they didn't know when a day would come and Sisera and his army would just come ride through the Israelite camp and just shoot them down with arrows. So that's what they were going through. And so the Israelites were very afraid of the Canaanites because of this, all of this. They were very afraid. So one day the Lord speaks to Deborah, though, because the Lord heard their cry. They were going through all of this bondage, all of this pain, all of this, fear that they were living in. And so they cried out to God, and God heard their cry. So the Lord speaks to Deborah, and he tells Deborah, the prophetess, he says, listen, I will deliver the Israelites from the Canaanite bondage. So Deborah went and found one of the top officers. His name was Barak. She went and found him to tell him what the Lord said. So now Barak is one of the top officers in the Israelite army. So when God gives Deborah the message that he's going to deliver the Israelites, she calls Barak to come so she could tell him what the Lord told him. And not just that, the Lord told her what they should do in order to become free. So now we see here, this is a little different, right? So the Lord is giving a woman the battle plan, right? So usually all of the judges so far have been men, and she is going to become a judge, but right now she's a prophetess, and the Lord speaks to her. So the Lord chooses her, Deborah, to be the one to have the plan to set Israel free from the Canaanites. So listen, if you didn't know, the Lord can use anybody. It's not just men. The Lord can use women as well to do mighty things. And we'll see that with Deborah. Now, she won't necessarily go out to battle like in the army, kind of, sort of. But we see the Lord is giving her the plan, the message on how to defeat the Canaanites. So she tells him, she says, the Lord God of Israel has commanded you to get 10,000 men together and lead them against General Sisera's army. You and Israel's army are to march to Mount Tabor, and the enemy will be drawn down to the Kishon River, where you will defeat him. So the Lord told them basically to get 10,000 men together to march and go and meet the army, and to go down to they would come and meet them, and they would have a battle. And so Barak, when he hears this, though, he's like, what? Get 10,000 men and go fight them. Now, remember, I told you already, the army was really powerful. This was a really powerful army. The Canaanite army was very strong, and they had a strong general. And so he's like, and now this is crazy. Barak is the officer in the army. He shouldn't be scared, right? But he was, because he knew how powerful this army was. And he's like, the Lord told you this, Deborah? I don't know, Deborah, because that army is really strong. Are you sure the Lord told you this? He says, I don't know, Deborah, but she assured him that this is what the Lord said. This is what God, and then I just said, but we know that God will not tell us something that won't happen, right? And God will not make up something. The Lord, if he says something, it will happen. So if he spoke that word that they would have the victory, then it would happen. It's just, they have to have the faith to believe that what God said would happen will happen. So Barak is like, okay. He says, look, I'll go into battle with the Canaanites. I'll do it because you said the Lord said it, Deborah, but I need you to come with me. So he wanted Deborah to go with them. And Deborah said, okay. So she didn't even think about it. She was like, okay, I'll come. But she says, but if we defeat the Canaanites, I'm letting you know now that the honor of this battle will go to a woman. It will be me who will get the honor of this battle, not you, even though you are the leader in this army. You are the general, the top officer. But since I am coming with you, whenever we win this battle, guess who you're going to give the honor to? Me, the woman, Deborah, because that was uncommon for women to, be in the army, for women to go out to battle. It was usually the men that would do that. But this time the Lord was doing something different. And so Deborah's like, listen, if we go out and we win, you're going to give the honor to me. Not that she was saying it like in a private way. Of course, they're going to give the honor to God. But you know what I mean by saying that. Like, they won because of a woman. So Deborah, she said, okay, I'm gonna come. So she got herself together and she went and marched with Barak and the 10,000 soldiers in the Israelite army to go and fight against Sisera and the Canaanite army. So when the general was Sisera of the Canaanite army, he was told that the Israelites were coming and that they were camped at Mount Tabor. And so he prepared for his entire army to come to war. So they only had 10,000, but he had his whole army come, plus those 900 chariots I told you he had, the iron chariots. So that means those chariots were not easy to break down, defeat. They were made of iron. So he got all of that together to go fight the people. Now look at that. So they're only 10,000. They're not as many as he is with his army and as powerful and as strong as they are. Plus he had those chariots, but he goes. And so he led his army down to the Kishon River in the valley. And so the two armies approached, ready for battle. So Barak and his soldiers saw them coming, and the battle began. But what did the Lord say would happen? Who would have the victory? The Israelites, right? The Israelites would have the victory. So the battle begins. And so Deborah says to Barak, she says, up. She says, go, for this day which the Lord has given you. He has given you victory over this Canaanite army. The Lord is with you. She says, go and attack at once. So she's there encouraging him now. Like I said, she wasn't fighting necessarily, but, she was there. So Barak in the lead, the Israelite army charged down the mountainside to attack the Canaanite army. And in that battle that followed, now this is cool. The Lord, he threw the Canaanites into a panic. So like they all of a sudden became like, y'all know what panicking means, right? Like they just started to get nervous and like scared. And so the soldiers in the chariots, they were fighting near the river. And so what ends up happening, they get into a panic and they end up drowning in the river. The river like sweeps them away. So that's why the Lord told them to go fight there. And so the Bible also tells us that the stars and their courses fought against Sisera as well. But what it means is the Lord again intervened. He did something supernatural, using nature again, kind of like with Joshua with the sun, moon, and stars, sun and moon stand still, the hailstorm. The Lord did it again for his people. And so in the confusion of the battle, Sisera leaped from his chariot and began to run, right? Run to escape being captured because his army started losing. Some of them got swept away by the river. The Lord was fighting for his people. So some of the other Canaanite army, they were gone as well. And so Sisera, he saw that his Canaanite army was losing the battle. So he tries to hurry and run away so that he doesn't get captured. Just like the 5 kings, right? When they saw their army was losing, they tried to escape. He's doing the same thing. But Barak and his men chased after the whole army until they all were gone. Now, Sisera, he did escape. He got away. But of course, we know not for long, right? Just like the kings thought they got away in the cave, he didn't get away for long as well. So whenever he escaped, he kept running and running until he saw a tent, and he was like, okay, this will be perfect place for me to stay. So he came to the tent of a woman named Jael, where he was like, I'm going to be safe here. Nobody's going to find me here. They wouldn't even expect me to be here. So he really thought he got away. He's like, my army lost the battle, but oh well, I'm safe. Now that's not a general, right? Yeah. A leader, you let your army lose and you escape. Yeah. But anyway, but little did he know, this woman recognized who he was. And she knew exactly who he was, and that he was the leader of the Canaanite army. And she was not on the Canaanite side. But he did not know that she knew who he was. He thought, oh, this little tent by itself, this woman doesn't know who I am. I'm going to be okay. But he did not know she, in fact, did know who he was. And she knew about how evil the Canaanite army was and all that they have been doing to the Israelites, all that they, the bondage they put them under, all of that. And so she was like, okay. So she pretended to be friendly. She was like, oh, do you need help? Are you okay? And so she's like, come on in. Don't be afraid. You're going to be safe here in my tent. You're going to be okay. You will be safe. And so she says, come in, lay down and rest. Now she's being so kind to him, but little did he know, she's tricking him. She's tricking him. And so he's like, I'm thirsty. Please give me some water. So she opened it up. She gave him some milk. He drank some milk and he's feeling good. He's like, man, I don't have to worry about this battle no more. I escaped. I'm just going to run away. They will never find me. And so he was like, I need to sleep, because he was in battle. And so he's like, I'm tired. I need to sleep. He was like, could you just stand in the doorway of the tent and watch? He says, and if somebody comes and asks you if anybody's here, just say no, because they might be looking for me. So just tell them no. And she's like, of course, you're going to be safe here. You're going to be so safe here. Yeah, I think she's going to keep him safe. No. Let's see. So Sisera, he fell asleep. He goes into a deep sleep because he's thinking he's safe. He's like, I'm good. I don't have to worry about anything. So he goes to sleep completely exhausted, deep sleep. But then Jael, she sees that he's sleeping. So she picks up a tent spike. I'm not sure if you know what the tent spikes are, but think of like a long nail. Usually when you like pitch a tent, you have to have like these little spikes that you put in the ground so the tent doesn't fly away. But just think of like a long nail. So she gets one of the tent spikes and she basically executes him with that. She kills him, right? But like I said, he didn't know. She knew who he was. And so Sisera, he ends up dying by the hand of a woman. What did Deborah tell Barak when they went into battle? She said, whenever this battle is over, the honor will be given to who? Well, her, but a woman. So it is technically her, but also, yeah, Jael. Anyway, so he dies. And so later on, they do come looking for, Sisera, because they knew he couldn't have gotten far. And so Barak and the army, they end up coming to the tent of Jael. And there's like, was there a man that came here? And she says, come, I will show you the man that you're looking for. They followed her into the tent and saw that he was dead. Sisera was dead, and he had died at the hand of a woman, just like Deborah said. And so Israel's victory over the Canaanites was so great, they were able to defeat them. After the battle was over, Deborah and Barak thanked God for coming through for them and giving them the victory. And they sung a song of praise to the Lord that you can find in the book of Judges, that they sung to the Lord. And so Deborah ended up becoming judge over Israel after this for 40 years. She judged the land, which, they had rest during that time. We talked about that already all the time. Every time there's a judge, they always have rest and peace. Nobody's ruling over them. No army is attacking them. Everything is, is prosperous. It's all good, right? But of course, we know Deborah will die eventually, right? She's not going to be judged forever and ever. She does eventually die. And we see that the people turn away from God yet again. They turn away from the Lord and they start to worship idols again. And they started to worship the Canaanite gods this time. Yeah, Canaanites are just ruling over them. They start to worship their gods. So they even built altars to worship the gods. They would make sacrifices to these gods. They were bowing down to these statues. And then they started to also live like the Canaanites. They would do wicked things like the Canaanites, things that God had forbid them to do. They started to do those things like the Canaanites. So the Lord, guess what he did? He raised up their enemies to come over them. And we'll talk about that on tomorrow, because we'll talk about a lot, because they let all those people stay in the land. And so we'll see tomorrow how the Lord, he's gonna raise up a judge, because like I told you, it's a constant cycle, y'all. Like they turn away from God, the Lord raises up their enemy, they cry out to the Lord, and then he raises up a judge. Okay, so tomorrow's judge is Gideon. That's who we're going to talk about. Actually, for tomorrow and next week, we'll kind of talk about Gideon a little bit. Then we'll move on to Samson. Okay, so we have our first woman judge over Israel, Deborah. She judged for 40 years. She was the one who the Lord spoke to and gave the battle plan to Barak to go out and defeat the Canaanite army. The Lord told him to get 10,000 men together to go down to the river, where the Lord used the river to kind of drown some of the people, and the Lord also fought for the people as well. But then Sisera, the general, he thought he got away. Little did he know the tent that he ended up in would be the place where he died, and this woman Jael ends up slaying him. She ends up slaying him in the tent, and so they had the victory, and it was by the hands of a woman. So the Lord used Deborah and Jael to lead the people to victory. And so again, Deborah judged Israel 40 years. She ruled over the people. And like I say all the time, everything is peace and prosperous, right? When the judge is there, but it's not until they're gone. Okay. All right. So that's our Bible lesson on today, guys. So tomorrow we'll get into Gideon. The Lord will raise up the Midianites over the people. So we'll see how God will call Gideon. And Gideon's story is a little different than everybody else's story. Okay. All right. So that's it for Bible today, guys. I hope y'all have a good day. I'll see everybody later on. Bye-bye.